The air in my quiet, usually peaceful cul-de-sac had been thick with a different kind of humidity lately. Not the muggy Georgia heat, but the palpable tension radiating from number 14, the meticulously manicured lawn of Karen Clayson, HOA president, and, in my personal assessment, professional thorn in my side. For years, Karen had been a persistent breeze of microaggressions and petty grievances, ranging from the precise height of my grass, always an eighth of an inch too high apparently, to the allegedly offensive color of my trash bins. I'd learned to navigate her nitpicking with a mix of polite indifference and the occasional pointed reminder that I was, in fact, abiding by all the HOA regulations, something she conveniently overlooked when it suited her agenda. But this felt different. This wasn't just a nitpick about the placement of my recycling. This was envy pure and distilled, simmering in her eyes like a poorly brewed pot of coffee. It had started when the Rosso Corsa Ferrari pulled into my driveway last week. It was a dream realized, a culmination of years of relentless work and strategic investments. I'd earned that car, every single gleaming inch of its Italian craftsmanship, and I wasn't about to apologize for it. I'd noticed her staring, the way her perfectly Botox brow furrowed as she pretended to prune her roses, her gaze lingering a little too long on the sleek lines and the roaring engine. I knew deep down that this wasn't going to end with a passive-aggressive note slipped under my door. Karen was a creature of escalation. She thrived on control, on the power she wielded, however insignificant it might seem to an outsider. The Ferrari was an affront, a symbol of my success that she couldn't comprehend or control. It was a challenge, a red flag waved in front of a particularly volatile bull. I could practically feel her plotting, the wheels turning in her head as she concocted some scheme to regain her perceived dominance. The air was thick with it, a predator circling its prey. I knew I couldn't just sit back and wait for her to strike. I had to be proactive, anticipate her moves, and most importantly, protect my property. More than that, I needed to finally put an end to this harassment, to draw a definitive line in the sand that even Karen Clayson wouldn't dare to cross. I needed a plan, a solid strategy to expose her for who she truly was and ensure that she faced the consequences of her actions. Sleep was restless that night, my mind racing with possibilities, scenarios playing out like a tense, drawn-out chess match. The Ferrari, my prized possession, had become the pawn in a game I never asked to play. But I was ready to play it, and I was determined to win. I reached for my phone and began making calls, setting in motion a series of events that would ultimately reveal the true depths of Karen's obsession. The next morning, I started putting my plan into action. First, I called Officer Miller down at the precinct. He knew Karen. Everyone knew Karen. He dealt with her before, mostly noise complaints and minor disputes, but he understood the potential for escalation. I laid it all out for him, the history of harassment, the recent obsession with a Ferrari, my gut feeling that she was planning something drastic. He listened attentively, his voice calm and reassuring. "We've had our eye on her, Mr. Jones," he said. "She's been making some questionable inquiries about property laws and neighborhood watch procedures." He couldn't authorize a full-blown surveillance operation based solely on my suspicions, but he agreed to discreetly station a patrol car nearby for the next few days. He also suggested I install some additional security cameras, which I did immediately. I opted for high-definition models with infrared capabilities and wide-angle lenses, strategically positioned to cover every angle of my driveway and the perimeter of my property. I made sure they were clearly visible, hoping the mere presence of the cameras might deter Karen from acting. But I wasn't counting on it. Next, I contacted a private security firm. I needed someone who could monitor the camera feeds around the clock and react instantly if anything happened. They agreed to set up a remote monitoring station and dispatch a team to my location within minutes of an alarm trigger. I also made sure they had clear instructions, no direct intervention unless absolutely necessary. I wanted Karen to incriminate herself, to act without realizing she was being watched. The goal wasn't just to protect my car. It was to expose her actions to the authorities and hopefully put an end to her reign of terror in the HOA. Finally, I called my cousin Marcus, a mountain of a man with a gentle heart and a long history in law enforcement before he started his own gym. I filled him in on the situation, explaining Karen's pattern of behavior and my concerns about her potential actions. Marcus, ever the protector, offered to come over and keep an eye on things. I politely declined, explaining that his presence might spook Karen and derail the plan. But I did ask him to be on standby, just in case things escalated beyond my control. Just say the word, cuz, he said, his voice low and gravelly. I'll be there in 5 minutes. With the cameras installed, the security firm on alert, and Marcus on standby, I felt a sense of cautious optimism. The trap was set. Now all I had to do was wait. And watch. The next 2 days were an agonizing exercise in patience. I went about my daily routine, trying to appear nonchalant, but every rustle of leaves, every passing car sent a jolt of anxiety through me. I could feel Karen's eyes on me, watching from behind her perfectly manicured hedges, her gaze like a laser beam boring into my back. The security firm confirmed that she had been spending an inordinate amount of time observing my property, pacing back and forth in her yard, occasionally stopping to scribble notes in a small notepad. I reviewed the camera footage obsessively, searching for any sign of her planning, any indication of her intentions. I saw her conferring with other members of the HO, whispering conspiratorially, their eyes darting towards my house. I saw her purchasing tools at the local hardware store, a bolt cutter glinting ominously in her shopping cart. The evidence was mounting, painting a clear picture of her impending actions. On the third night, I received a call from the security firm. "We've got movement, Mr. Jones," the operator said, his voice tense. "Subject is approaching your property from the rear." I rushed to my monitor, my heart pounding in my chest. There she was, Karen Clayson, cloaked in the shadows, her face obscured by a wide-brimmed hat. She moved with a determined purpose, her gait betraying a mixture of fear and excitement. In her hand, she carried the bolt cutter, its steel jaws gleaming under the dim moonlight. I watched transfixed as she crept towards the Ferrari, her movements slow and deliberate. She paused for a moment, surveying the scene, ensuring that no one was watching. Then, with a deep breath, she reached for the lock that secured the protective cover over the car. I could hear the metallic click as she positioned the bolt cutter, the strain in her arms as she applied pressure. A sickening snap echoed through the night as the lock gave way. The cover sagged, revealing the gleaming Rosso Corsa paint beneath. I knew I had her. The evidence was irrefutable, captured in crystal clear high definition. But I couldn't help but feel a sense of sadness, a pity for this woman who had allowed her envy and obsession to consume her. She had crossed a line that could have devastating consequences for her life. But she had made her choice, and now she had to face the consequences. I gave the signal to the security firm, and they immediately contacted Officer Miller. It was time to bring this charade to an end. The sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder with each passing second. Karen, startled by the sudden noise, froze in place, her eyes wide with panic. She dropped the bolt cutter, the heavy tool clattering against the concrete driveway. She turned to flee, but it was too late. The police cars screeched to a halt in front of my house, their headlights illuminating the scene like a stage production. 4 officers emerged from the vehicles, their faces grim and determined. Officer Miller, leading the charge, approached Karen with his hand outstretched. "Karen Clayson," he said, his voice firm but respectful. "You're under arrest for trespassing and attempted grand theft auto." Karen's face crumpled, her meticulously applied makeup streaking down her cheeks as tears welled up in her eyes. She stammered, trying to deny the obvious, but the words caught in her throat. The evidence was overwhelming, the security camera footage undeniable. The officers placed her in handcuffs, her protests growing increasingly desperate. "This is a mistake," she shrieked. "I'm the president of the HOA. You can't do this to me." Officer Miller remained unmoved. "Your position doesn't exempt you from the law, Ms. Clayson," he said calmly. "You have the right to remain silent." As they led her to the patrol car, she turned and glared at me, her eyes filled with pure, unadulterated hatred. "This isn't over, Curtis Jones," she screamed. "You will regret this." I watched as the police car pulled away, its taillights fading into the night. A wave of relief washed over me, but was quickly followed by a sense of unease. I knew that Karen wasn't going to go down without a fight. She was a master manipulator, a skilled liar, and she would undoubtedly try to twist the narrative to portray herself as the victim. I needed to be prepared for the fallout, for the inevitable backlash from her supporters within the HOA. I went inside, poured myself a glass of water, and sat down to review the security camera footage one last time. I needed to ensure that every detail was documented, every piece of evidence was preserved. This was far from over. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had the upper hand. The truth was on my side, and I was determined to see justice served. The arrest of Karen Clayson sent shockwaves through the community. The news spread like wildfire, fueled by social media and neighborhood gossip. The HOA was thrown into chaos, with members scrambling to distance themselves from the scandal. The local news picked up the story, highlighting Karen's position as HOA president and the alleged motive behind her actions: envy over my Ferrari. The public outcry was swift and fierce. Karen was vilified online, labeled a Karen in the most derogatory sense of the word. Her social media accounts were flooded with hateful comments and angry memes. The pressure mounted on her employer, a prestigious law firm, to take action. After a brief investigation, they announced her termination, citing a violation of their code of conduct. Her reputation lay in tatters, her career in ruins. The HOA held an emergency meeting to discuss the situation. A motion was made to remove Karen from her position as president, and it passed unanimously. A new election was scheduled, and the community rallied behind a candidate who promised transparency, fairness, and an end to the petty grievances that had plagued the HOA for years. I was approached by several residents who apologized for Karen's behavior and expressed their support. They confessed that they had been intimidated by her strong personality and her ability to manipulate the rules to her advantage. The impact of Karen's actions extended beyond the professional and political realms. Her husband, overwhelmed by the shame and embarrassment, filed for divorce. Her friends and neighbors began to avoid her, whispering behind her back whenever she appeared in public. She became a pariah, isolated and alone. I watched from a distance, feeling a mixture of pity and vindication. I never wanted this to happen to her, but I also knew that she had brought it upon herself. Her actions had consequences, and she was now facing the full weight of them. The unraveling of her life was a stark reminder that power, when abused, can be a dangerous thing, and that sometimes the most satisfying justice is simply watching someone face the consequences of their own choices. Months passed. The Ferrari gleamed in my driveway, a constant reminder of the turmoil I had endured. The HOA was under new leadership, and the atmosphere in the neighborhood had significantly improved. The petty grievances and microaggressions were a thing of the past. I had even made a few new friends, neighbors who had once been wary of me, but now welcomed me with open arms. Life was good, peaceful, and relatively drama-free. Then I saw her. It was a cold, rainy day. I was driving home from work when I spotted a figure huddled under a tattered umbrella on a street corner. As I got closer, I recognized the familiar silhouette. The posture that had once exuded authority now slumped with defeat. It was Karen Clayson. Her hair was unkempt, her clothes were stained and wrinkled, and her face was gaunt and haggard. She looked like a completely different person, a shadow of the woman she once was. I pulled over to the side of the road, my heart heavy with a mixture of emotions. I didn't know what to say, what to do. I watched her for a moment, her eyes fixed on the ground, her hands outstretched, begging for spare change. The irony was almost unbearable. The woman who had once wielded power and influence was now reduced to begging for survival. I rolled down my window. "Karen," I said softly. She looked up, her eyes widening with a mixture of surprise and shame. She averted her gaze, trying to hide her face behind her umbrella. "Please, just go away," she mumbled. "I don't want anything from you." I hesitated for a moment, unsure of what to do. I could drive away, pretend I hadn't seen her, and continue on with my life. But something inside me wouldn't let me. I got out of the car and walked towards her, offering her a $50 bill. At first, she refused, shaking her head vehemently. But I insisted, placing the money in her outstretched hand. "Take it, Karen," I said. "You need it." She looked at the money, then back at me, tears streaming down her face. I don't know what to say," she stammered. "Thank you." I nodded, turned, and walked back to my car. As I drove away, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had just witnessed the bitter end of a tragic story. Karen Clayson's life had been destroyed by her own actions, by her unchecked envy and insatiable need for control. And while I had played a role in bringing her downfall, I couldn't help but feel a profound sense of sadness for the woman she had become. It was a stark reminder that actions have consequences, and that sometimes the greatest victory is not revenge, but forgiveness.